I don't think they can win with Joe Biden. I think the only way is to find a way for him to say, I'm not running, and to replace him at the Democratic convention in August, and hope to God that that gives him a shot. And I frankly can't see how he can recover from the kind of sentiment that is out there. It's not new, and it's only been made worse by the events of the last couple of weeks. President Trump has been seen as the stronger of the two men for over a year. And then on Saturday night, in that iconic moment when he struggles to his feet, pushes his way through a scrum of Secret Service agents in order to, with blood flowing down his face, raise a fist as an act of defiance and reassurance to the crowd. You saw how the crowd reacted that evening.
Longtime Republican strategist Karl Rove with that analysis yesterday on Fox Business. As the Republicans present a united front at their convention this week, Democrats remain fractured. A group of House Democrats want the DNC to delay its virtual roll call to select the party's presidential nominee. The DNC plans to hold the vote as early as July 21st, initially moving it up to ensure the party meets Ohio's deadline to certify the presidential ticket. But Ohio lawmakers changed that deadline, pushing it past next month's Democratic convention. Now, more than 20 Democrats have signed a letter saying the early virtual roll call is not necessary, citing growing concerns over the president's campaign.
You know,
and yet.
Yeah, no, this is what's so interesting. Mike Barnicle, I'm going to show you some polls here. Because, you know, my feeling, Mike, is if they just want to say that Joe Biden is too diminished and he needs to step aside, then just say that. But instead, they go, oh, the polls. You and I have heard this. Oh, the polls are so bad. He can't win. He can't win. It's impossible. There are 110, 111 days left in this election. At this point in 88, Michael Dukakis was what, 15, 16, 17 points ahead? At this point in 2016, Hillary Clinton was going on Saturday Night Live, laughing and mocking Donald Trump and talking about how lucky she was to have drawn Donald Trump as her Republican opponent. And everybody, but I'll say a few of us, said there was no way Donald Trump could win. No way. Everybody. Go back and look at the tape. In 2020, Joe Biden was supposedly up by 10, 12 points in Michigan and Wisconsin a couple of days beforehand, led me to saying I trust no polls. It ended up being very tight. In 22, we heard about the red wave that never materialized. I mean, it's such BS. I really want to use a stronger word. Everybody goes, oh, well, I was the only one that was saying there wasn't going to be a red wave. Really? No. Really? Oh, I knew Donald Trump was going to win in 26. Really? No, you didn't. No, you didn't, because we were mocked and ridiculed repeatedly for saying that Donald Trump could win in 2016. In 2022, everybody was talking about the red wave, and I just don't see it. Now we hear from Democrats on the inside, see also Obama supporters, saying there's no way he can win. He's down so low. It's all over. Well, here's the latest Morning Consult poll taken on Monday. Last week, before the tragic assassination attempt, Donald Trump was up by 2 points. On Monday, it's just a snapshot. Donald Trump up by 1 point. According to a single-day survey, Trump leads by 1 point among registered voters nationwide. That's about 2,000 plus registered voters, so a pretty good sample size. That's within the margin of error. In a poll conducted over 3 days last week, of course, Trump led by 2 percentage points. So it's a 1 point race. Again, just a snapshot. But here's the deal, everybody. If you're looking at this, don't look at the margins. Look at the fact that it's a tie. This race is tied. Another snapshot poll, this one conducted yesterday, also shows November's election up for grabs. In the latest Reuters Ipsos national survey, Donald Trump leads Joe Biden by 2 points, 43 to 41% among registered voters. Again, a tie. Now let's go, because people say, oh, well, in the battleground states, he's losing by 87 points. Oh, we must do something, David Axelrod says on CNN. Oh, there's no way he can win, says the Pod Bros. Oh, it's all over. Well, okay, so let's go to what is probably his weakest swing state, Georgia. A Fox 5 Atlanta and Insider Advantage survey has Trump leading by 3 points in Georgia over Joe Biden, 47 to 44% among likely voters in the swing state. That's, Mike, that's about as close as Georgia has been over the past several months. And in fact, a CBS poll that was out this weekend showed again a tie. It was a 2-point lead by Donald Trump over Joe Biden in Georgia, which again, I saw 6, 7, 8 points about a month ago. Now, let's look for a second at what's happened. Of course, we talked about the tragic assassination attempt and the tragic killings at his rally in Pennsylvania. We've talked about that. We've talked ad nauseum about Joe Biden turning in the worst presidential performance ever in the history of televised debates. Before that, these same people that are saying he must go were telling me he's going to be down 10 points. I have it on good authority that he's going to be down 10 points in all the polls that are going to be coming out. I have it on good authority. It ended up being like 3, down by 3 points. We had the Lester Holt interview. Everybody calling me, oh, well, that's the end. Did you see? He mumbled like Chewbacca at the end. He's just, that's the end. It's all over. We're not going to like Chewbacca. It's done. It's done. We had the press conference. Oh, he said President Putin instead of President Zelensky. Oh, he said Vice President Trump. It's over. It's done. People factored all this in, Mike. They factored it all in. Joe Biden, I got bad news for them and for Joe Biden. Joe Biden wasn't good at talking in 1987.
He has a stutter.
When he was humiliated and driven from the race in probably one of the most humiliating endings to a presidential campaign imaginable. 2008, not much better. The gaffes on the campaign trails, the things that made staff members go, ay, what's going on with this guy? So people know Joe Biden. They factored this in. People know Donald Trump. They factored this in. Now, all this could change in a week. Who knows? But right now, as we said yesterday, we live in a 46-46 country, not a 50-50 country. We live in a 46-46 country. And the Democrats have got either fish or cut bait. Like, if they can't drive Joe Biden from the race, they need to line up behind Joe Biden because there's no middle ground here. You're either united, a house divided against itself can't stand. You're either united or your side loses. They've got to make decisions fast. And all these stories about Nancy furiously going around trying to undermine Joe Biden, it's not working. I mean, I don't even know if that's true. We keep hearing about Barack Obama and all of Barack Obama's people quietly working behind the scenes to undermine Joe Biden. If they are,
that's not helpful. It's
not helpful, first of all. And secondly, it's not working with the rank and file base. After all of these historic moments, and Republicans are in Milwaukee, they know they're going to win. Just like, Karl Rove said Joe Biden can't win. I understand. He's turned in a terrible debate performance. He has trouble in interviews. He always has. But again, I want to see the polling that says that. I want to see the numbers that say that, because all I hear is, oh, there's a secret poll. Oh, I've looked at internals of candidates, and he's down by 87. Every public poll that's come out has this race tied, Mike, even after two of the most historic events in recent American political history.
Yeah. Joe, I don't know what to believe in terms of polls right now, given the volatility out there in this country. I mean, the country was truly shaken to its core over the weekend. That's a given. And each and every day, it seems something happens in everyone's lives that cause them to look at our politics and say, oh, geez, I'm going to stay away from that. But with regard to Joe Biden, I was watching him speak in Las Vegas yesterday, and he clearly is going back to an old, proven route for Democrats. He's talking about issues where people live and talking about what's going to happen if there's a change in administration, if the Trump administration, the Trump-Vance administration succeeds him, and the losses that people will endure, and losses in terms of what's going to happen to Social Security, what's going to happen to Medicare and Medicaid, what's going to happen to the civil service function in this society where independent people go to work each and every day for the federal government, what's going to happen to clean air, clean water, food, regulatory agencies that protect the public and make the public lives more safe, allowed to live more safely because of rules and regulations that are put down. What's going to happen to billionaires? Are they going to become double billionaires or whatever they call themselves, trillionaires, when they make even more money? What's going to happen to the tax code with another tax cut provided by the Trump administration next January or February? What's going to happen to people's lives on a daily basis? How much is the ordinary American going to lose under an incoming Republican administration? People who live on the margins, people who live paycheck to paycheck, what's going to happen to their lives? Are they going to be better off under a Republican administration? A proven commitment to rich people in this country, proven, as opposed to a Biden administration and sort of an old combination of FDR, Harry Truman, JFK, LBJ stuff. What's going to happen to people? That's the question that Joe Biden has to answer. That's the question he was pushing yesterday in Las Vegas, and he didn't look bad.
That speech in Las Vegas to the NAACP, he said, I'm all in. Again, he can't be more clear where he's coming from. He sent the letter to Congress. Even after that, members of Congress said, we need an answer, make a decision, to which he said, I've made my decision. I'm all in. He reiterated that yesterday. Those national polls are neck and neck. There has been some slippage, but still mostly within the margin of error in those battleground states. Trump has definitely made up a little ground, but my gosh, those are all winnable, the Biden campaign would tell you. I think what people are seeing, though, is not the gaffes of Joe Biden of the past. They're seeing gaffes as a result of age. And there are concerns, and polls show this, even within the Democratic Party. Is he up for the job? But as Joe says, make up your mind. If he's too old for the job, just say that. But you got to point to some data that shows he can't win if you're saying he can't win.
Right. Polls well before the debate showed that Democrats thought he might be too old, and that's only increased. But it can't be said enough. Polls show this is a pretty static race, and it just seems so premature that there were pundits on Saturday night or Sunday in the wake of that shooting saying, that's it, the race is over. We have this image, this defiant image of Donald Trump, his fist raised, blood on his face, game over. And it's clearly not. This is still a tight race. Now, the Biden team has work to do still. They know that, and that includes fending off voices within their own party. First of all, we're seeing the president go at the coalitions. Yesterday's event was about black voters, the NAACP. Today, he's got an event squarely geared at Latino voters. The Supreme Court push that we detailed earlier in the show is a nod towards progressives. It came from a call he had with them in the last few days. He's trying to shore up his base of support because there are still some Democratic lawmakers out there who want to try to see a change in the ticket. And Joe, that's why there has been real fury in the last day or so about this plan from the DNC to move ahead with this virtual roll call, which many Democrats say, hey, yeah, it was needed when Ohio was trying to game the system and keep him off the ballot. It no longer is because the state pushed off that deadline. And to the Democrats who are opposed to Joe Biden, they feel like rushing this through silences that debate. The Biden team answers simply saying, this is the plan, we're staying with it, and listen to the president. He's not going anywhere, and he can still win.
He's not going. He's not going anywhere. He's not. Let me say again, the day after the debate, I said he needed to consider stepping down. I said, let's wait a couple of days, see what happens, see where this goes. If everybody was right and he was going to lose 10 points, or if his family and him got together and decided he wasn't up to the job, he needed to step aside. Well, the guy with 14 million votes from Democrats in the primary said he's going to stay. And I know that may make some people that worked in the Obama administration angry. I understand that. They didn't like him when he worked in the Obama administrations. The stories I could tell, but I won't. I mean, he says he's staying in it. We don't know what's going to happen. He may have another incident, right? But he's got the 14 million votes. He's got about 90% of the delegates. He's decided he's going to stay in the race, even after the worst debate performance of not only his life, but of that any of us have seen in our lifetimes from a major presidential candidate, even after the tragic assassination attempt this weekend, even after Donald Trump's heroic response to that, even after all that, we're still a 46-46 nation. And you can whisper to everybody, and you can call all the big fundraisers, you can call all your billionaire friends and say, don't give Biden any money, which is what's going on right now. Call all those billionaire friends you want to. Call all of the most powerful people in politics and the media and try to push the guy off the ticket. You can do that. You've been trying to do it now for 3 weeks. It's not working. He's saying he's not going anywhere. And if you look at the poll numbers, the people who actually answer these polls, who aren't elitist billionaires in Silicon Valley or in the media or in Washington, D.C., or on the Upper East Side of Manhattan, those people are saying, you know what? We're good with a guy from Delaware. We're good with a state school guy. We're good. That's what they're saying right now. Again, politics is fluid. It could change tomorrow. It could change the next day. The only thing I'm striking back against here are people saying it's over. There's no way he can win.
Well, it's not
That's
helpful.
just 110 days. And the only thing that they're doing, as I said a couple days ago, Democratic pollsters are saying the only thing they're doing is they're hurting Joe Biden with some Democratic voters who hear this from Democrats and then pull away from Joe Biden.
So MAGA Republicans are a lot of things that perhaps some Americans fear in terms of the future of our democracy, but they are unified. And that is something that the Democrats are not. And it's, when that debate performance happened, many, like you, said, let's see what happens. Let's give it a week. Let's see. And the two things that people were focused on was performance and polls. So let's think about that. The polls haven't really moved, right? So if you think about after that debate performance.
Kind of have tightened up
After
in some
that
ways.
Debate performance.
I don't know how that happened.
Okay.
It was a horrible debate. It was just miserable.
Then the president, I can only name a few because he's been on the road since proving himself, but that NATO news conference, which went well past 8 p.m., so nobody can make those snarky comments, especially those on the Trump side, watching a presidency that Trump had where he didn't do a lot of work daily. But the NATO news conference showed the depth of his dynamic knowledge around the world as he took reporters on
the response
to every region around the world.
The response to David Sanger, please give me transcript, any transcript from any Donald Trump press conference while he's president of the United States talking on foreign policy, and match the transcript and the knowledge, the working knowledge up between Joe Biden and Donald Trump. He confused order to. By the way, it's very funny. David Axelrod a couple nights ago was going through when Joe Biden spoke on Sunday night, he cut a word off. And David Axelrod, of course, had to bring that up.
And then got someone's name wrong.
And then got somebody's name wrong. So does David Axelrod need to get off of TV? This happens. Media people keep going, oh, Joe Biden confused names. Then they throw to somebody and they confuse a name.
We know we do that. But then he also in that news conference talked about his time in the Senate. Yeah. And how that experience has led to his ability to pass historic bipartisan legislation at a time like right now, where you would think you couldn't get anything through. Right. So then after the assassination attempt on Donald Trump, he held a message to the nation from the Oval Office telling people to bring the temperature down. He's doing everything right. He's doing events across the country. Crowds are screaming, we have your back. The question is, are Democrats going to have him back? One Democrat, Barack Obama. Because if former President Barack Obama would step up and get behind Joe Biden, that would stop all of this, and that would make all the difference. And it seems right now that after everything that has happened, it seems that unity is more important than ever because the Republicans, Trump Republicans, are going to steal that unified message from the Democrats.
Right now it's a choice. Right now it is a choice. maybe a couple weeks ago, there was an idea because everybody was calling, game of telephone, and talking about a brokered convention, an open convention. That was the dream. Or talking about Kamala Harris, or talking about, Josh Shapiro. That was the dream. That's not going to happen unless something really dramatic changes. Joe Biden keeps telling people, he told Al Sharpton this weekend, he's told Lester Holt, he keeps telling everybody, I'm not leaving this race. And if that's the case, then this race is very clear. It's a choice between Donald Trump and J.D. Vance running the country over the next 4 years and Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. So 110 days left, a lifetime in American politics. But at some point, said it last week, Democrats have to come together. They just have to come together unless they want Donald Trump and J.D. Vance controlling Washington, D.C., and changing the way Washington works for the next generation. John.
Let's bring in the aforementioned New Jersey congressman and Democratic candidate for Senate, Andy Kim. He is looking to oust Menendez this November while the incumbent senator runs as an independent. Congressman, it's good to have you with us. Your reaction to a verdict that includes convictions on charges of bribery, extortion, acting as a foreign agent, obstruction of justice, and several counts of conspiracy. Do you believe now that Senator Menendez needs to step aside?
Yeah, I look at this in two ways. One is that, I work a job, the senator works a job. We work jobs whose job descriptions are in the Constitution of the United States. And that should call upon us to be held to the highest level of accountability and standard. And the second part is from the people of New Jersey. 84% of people in New Jersey surveyed believe that their elected officials are corrupt. How can a democracy function? How can my state be able to manage all the challenges that we face with that much distrust? We have a crisis of trust in government right now in New Jersey and around the country, and that compels the senator to do the right thing for us and allow us to be able to move forward, turn the corner, and try to restore a sense of integrity to our politics.
So Senator Cory Booker, of course, Senator Menendez's colleague from New Jersey, has said he will help now lead the effort to expel Bob Menendez from the United States Senate. Chuck Schumer came out yesterday for the first time and said, okay, now we have convictions. It's time. He's got to go away. Should Senator Menendez be expelled from the Senate?
If it comes to that, I trust the Senate to move forward in that direction. But for the sake of New Jersey, for the country, the best option here is for the senator to own up to what has happened. That he had his day in court, which is what he asked for. He had a fair shot at this, and the people and the jury deliberated and decided he should accept that and on his own volition step down. But if that does not happen, I believe that the Senate will move forward with that vote.
And it's pretty clear, Claire, Senator Menendez, your former Democratic colleague, is not going to accept this. He says he's very disappointed. He doesn't believe it's a fair or accurate verdict and that he is going to appeal. It doesn't look anyway like he's going anywhere.
Yeah, I don't even know where to start with this guy. Who does this? Who is put on trial for criminal acts as a United States senator, and there's a hung jury, he's not acquitted, and then he comes back and takes cars and gold bars and cash stuffed in jackets, and then he stands in front of the courthouse and acts like he's a victim? The most selfish act possible is for Bob Menendez not to look in the mirror and realize for the good of his country, if he cares about his country, he needs to get out of town. And by the way, what jerk blames his new wife at the trial? Who does that?
Cancer-stricken wife, we should add.
I would use a word right now that they would not like me to use in the control room, but he is just a word that starts with an A and ends with an E. Mm-hmm. He is a jerk, and he needs to go. And I want Schumer to call the expulsion vote. I think he should call it next week, and let the Republicans stew in the fact that a Democratic administration prosecuted a Democratic politician, and they maybe want to protect him. What kind of hypocrisy would that be? So let's call the vote and kick his ass out.
By the way, even just with the two vowels, I'm prepared to solve the puzzle. I know what the word is. Mike?
But Claire, back to the United States Senate.
Sorry,
itself.
I'm just out of my tree about this guy.
We'll talk about the institution itself. Congressman Kim was just talking about the obligations of public officials. And the institution itself, once revered, no longer revered.
Yeah, that's the other thing. I mean, I feel for Congressman Kim because, New Jersey has had more than its fair share of scandal around politicians. And it really is time. I think the congressman represents a new day in New Jersey politics. Some of the old people have fallen away. There have been other convictions that have occurred. I think it is time for New Jersey to move to a new, brighter future without corruption. And listen, is expulsion extreme? Yeah. The people who've been expelled from the United States Senate, most of them fought for the Confederacy and were part of the Confederacy. So this is something that would be extreme, but I think it's time for that. Barnacle, I think it's time for the United States Senate to stand strong for being against people who take gold bars from foreign countries or people when they're chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee of the United States Senate.
And access to classified information.
It's just
and
all
this is
of that.
About our national security.
All
in
of
many
that.
ways.
All of that.
So, Congressman, you're very clear about that. Let's get you on another topic we've been talking about this morning. President Biden, of course, says he wants to stay atop the ticket. There's been a push now by the DNC to hold a virtual roll call to officially nominate him in the next week or so, they're saying, so well ahead of the Chicago convention. Do you agree with that? Because there are many House lawmakers, many of your colleagues who have spoken out sharply against it, saying, why are we rushing this? We're still having a debate as to whether or not he's the best choice to lead the party.
Yeah, I mean, look, the question is what is necessary right now, given the timelines that are out there. And, as far as Ohio goes, we've seen a resolution to that issue in terms of what Ohio has done. So the point here is that when we move forward as a party, we have to do so with unity. Right now, we're certainly having our discussions and our debates. And to try to force something right now, push something that's premature, that's not needed, given what we've seen with the resolution, I don't think that's the right way to go forward. I think that there is room for us to have tough conversations with each other. We should do it now. I'm not... as someone who's lived through that Build Back Better time, I don't think we should be messaging to one another through Twitter. I think we should find ourselves in a room, lock the door until we come up with an understanding about what the strategy is going forward. And until we do so, I think that we have more time.
Do you believe, Congressman, the president should stay in the race?
Well, look, that's his decision. He is.
Well, he says he's
nominee.
Made his decision that he's staying in.
And look, I think that right now, if he wants to proceed in that direction, he needs to show that we have unity amongst the rest of the Democratic leadership. And that is something that we don't have right now. So, I do think that it's on him then to be able to bring everyone together and to be able to have those conversations, lay out the strategy. The conversations we have so far have not gone into the level of depth that's clearly needed for us to be able to think this through. So I respect him. I worked for him before at the White House. I understand how he thinks. He is somebody that is not going to be pushed into a decision. He's somebody that I think would be better for us to surround ourselves, have that kind of upfront conversation in person, rather than everything that's being laid out through social media. I don't think that this process that's happening right now is beneficial for our party. He's been
clear again and again, including yesterday, saying, I'm all in, that he's staying in the race. And it seems like Democrats can't take yes for an answer. So what is the conversation that's happening right now among your colleagues?
Well, I think the conversation that everyone wants to know is what is the full strategy here going forward? What's going to change coming out from the debate going forward in terms of how it's going to be messaged, what his posture would be in terms of public appearances and other things like that. And, we just haven't had that conversation. I think a lot of my colleagues don't feel like, myself included, don't feel like we've gotten the full sense of that. And I think that there's still room that's not best to be done through, again, through Twitter and social media. I really think at this point, we need to be able to show unity. I mean, look what we're seeing right now with the Republican National Convention. We're seeing a tremendous amount of effort on their end to try to project unity. And unity around very scary and dangerous proposals that will change this country forever. I'm a father of a 7-year-old and an 8-year-old. I don't want them growing up in America with Donald Trump back in the Oval Office. So, this is very personal to a lot of us, and we want to make sure that we're in the best position. As a Democrat that won a district Trump won twice, I know what it takes to be able to win tough areas. I have ideas to be able to contribute, and our party should be able to unite around that approach of what it means for our country at this point.
Joe?
Well, Congressman, does that mean then that the politician and president that got 14 million votes in the Democratic primary that has about 90% of the delegates, that he needs to be surrounded with support. I mean, because at this point, he has told everybody he's going to stay in the race. He told Reverend Al over the past weekend he's in the race for good. He's told everybody else he's in the race for good. And we've talked about it before, and it's just polls. I mean, I was once a politician, and, I always look at trend lines and polls. I didn't look at the exact numbers, but I did follow trend lines. I've got to say, every poll that I've seen out the last week, even polls taken after the tragic assassination attempt, actually show a tightening race. Redfield and Wilton, 43-42. Morning Consult, 46-45. Let's see, what else do we have here? Ipsos, 43-41. A Georgia race, it's now within 3 points. That's close. And again, I don't obsess over such things, but Democrats are. This just out from 538. Their projection, Joe Biden, 277 electoral votes based on all of their polling data. Donald Trump, 261 electoral votes. And they say that is the highest Joe Biden has been since May the 20th. So there's really not a good argument to be made, is there, that what's happened over the last couple of weeks, no matter how bad it's been, is stylistically has hurt him in the polls, because they've actually tightened up, haven't they, Congressman?
Yeah, look, I certainly think there is a real path to victory, and I believe that that we can be able to win with the approach that we're taking. But it's about, how do you close that last gap? How do you get those last few points that bring you over the top? Get the people who are still undecided. And there needs to be a real strategy about that right now. And I think that that's the conversation that needs to happen within the Democratic Party leadership, to be able to get everybody on board. And that's not, that's not where everyone's at
Congressman,
right now.
Congressman, 14 million Democrats across the country who still obviously support him. If you look at these polls, 14 million Democrats. How would you feel if you won your Democratic primary by 85%? And then when you got into the general election campaign, you had, mayors and party bigwigs and donors saying, oh, Congressman shouldn't run. We don't like how he debated. He needs to get out of the race. Would you get out of the race?
Well, look, that's not what I'm saying right now. This is a decision, again, for the president. This is a decision for the nominee. In terms of the strategy going forward, I'm not just saying
Congressman, he's made the decision. He's running. He's in it to win it.
I'm talking about the strategy, the message. How do we close those final points? That's what I want to hear from him. And what I think we can then say, how can we help? What is our role? And certainly, what's my role in New Jersey? What's the role across the board? So I think that that's the kind of approach that we should be taking. And I think that'll help us unify as quickly as possible.
Joining us now, senior advisor to the Biden-Harris campaign, the former mayor of the great city of Atlanta, Keisha Lance Bottoms. Ms. Mayor, good to have you back with us.
Thank you for having me.
You and I could do the whole interview on late 90s, early 2000s nightlife in Buckhead we were just discussing, but we'll push that to the side. We have more important issues to talk about. So you were watching the RNC last night. You hear the messaging out of there. The message is that the border is open, that people are flooding into the country, that it's Joe Biden's fault, that the economy, inflation is too high, and that the world is on fire. That's sort of their argument. As you listen to what you've heard over the last couple of nights, what's your response?
Yes, so much for the unity message, right? It's the same old rhetoric coming out of this MAGA Republican Party. It's about making people afraid. It's about attacking immigrants in this country. It's about all of these false narratives that really aren't helping move the needle in this country. And it's very disappointing, because this is a party that used to represent something other than hate and fear. And what I've watched the past couple of nights, there's not been a shift. There's just a smile with it.
Yeah, Mike Barnicle, the hilarious thing about what all of those people said was, one, illegal immigration, border crossings are down. Two, anybody that knows anything about anything says that fentanyl is shipped in, actually either in cars, trucks, whatever, so building walls won't stop fentanyl. And number three, of course, this is the 800-pound GOP elephant in the room. We had the toughest border control bill in our lifetime, drafted by a hardcore conservative Oklahoma senator, James Lankford. And Donald Trump sent the message, kill it because it's going to work too well and it will help Joe Biden. Kill this bill because, well, we just want to win the election. We don't care about fixing the border problem. Everybody that was up there that's in elected office, they're the ones who killed it for political reasons. They wanted to keep the border open. So they did.
Yeah, and the leader of the choir of negativity on the border was the Speaker, Mike Johnson, who made sure that word was passed both in the House and over to the Senate. The Senate already got the message. Vote this bill down because it's going to help Joe Biden. Mayor Bottoms, how do we reach people with the truth about the border, about immigration, but larger picture, how do we reach people who live day to day on the margins in this country, payroll to payroll in this country, about what the Democratic Party, what the Biden administration has done for them and what will happen to their progress under a Trump administration?
The president has to do just what we've seen him do over the past week or so, and that's take the message directly to the American people. I always give the example of the extremes, even in my own family. If I want to reach my mother, we can turn on the television. She's going to watch me this morning on cable news. She's going to get the information she needs to be informed. If I want to reach my 22-year-old son, we've got to hit social media. We've got to take it to our young people in the way that they receive information. And listen, it's hard to break through, but this is why the messaging is important across all platforms, continuing to tell the truth, continuing to get out information from trusted news sources, and then just talking to our fellow Americans and reminding them what this administration has done. Over the past week or so, I've been asking everyday people, how are they feeling about the election? What they're saying to me, we want Joe Biden as our nominee. People need to leave him alone. We need to move forward. This is what everyday folk are saying, and we are hearing the noise in Washington. We hear the discussions around immigration. We heard it coming out of the RNC, but we've got to talk to each other and tell the truth to each other.
So President Biden spoke at the NAACP National Convention in Las Vegas yesterday, where he slammed Donald Trump for claiming migrants coming into the country illegally are taking, quote, black jobs.
I love this phrase, black jobs. It tells a lot about the man and about his character. Folks, I know what a black job is. It's the Vice President of the United States. I know what a black job is. The first black president in American history, Barack Obama. I was vice president to Barack, and she is my vice president. I nominated the first black Secretary of Defense in American history. He's doing one hell of a job. I nominate the first black woman to the United States Supreme Court. It matters. It matters. And I promised myself, and I promised America, that my administration would look like America. And I'm proud that we have the most diverse administration in all of history that taps into the full talents of our nation. That's who we are.
You know, Jonathan Lemire, a very powerful message. And it's a powerful message because, yes, you have these examples and vice president. Of course, he talked about President Obama. Also, who he served under. Also talked about the first black woman to be on the United States Supreme Court. That's all pretty inspiring. But you look at the number of U.S. attorneys, look at the federal judges appointed, and it's almost a complete switch from Donald Trump, who, the first couple of years basically appointed white men, for the overwhelming number of white men, disproportionate number of white men. So there is quite a contrast between these two sides.
Yeah, first, it's noteworthy that was the president's first campaign event since the Saturday shooting at the Trump rally, and it shows it's still possible to draw really sharp contrasts with his opponent, Donald Trump, and this visit to Nevada, all about coalition building. So, Madam Mayor, we have seen polls, though, and Biden campaign officials acknowledge it privately, a little bit of slip in support among certain of those coalition groups, including black voters, for President Biden. They're showing up maybe a little bit more towards Donald Trump, or at the very least, a third-party candidate, or even the idea they just might stay home. That was a very fiery speech yesterday. But what else can the campaign do to win those voters back and say, look, he's still your guy?
We've got to remind people what this administration has done, what this president has done. And, polls are a snapshot in time. We know that in the midterm elections, there were these concerns about this red wave. It didn't happen. Even going back to 2020, during the primary season, there was a concern that Joe Biden wouldn't be the nominee. He proved them wrong. What we saw at that NAACP convention is the Joe Biden that wins. He does best when his back is up against the wall. And as we continue to remind people, especially the base, what this administration has done, then I think it will be easy to make a decision between two candidates. When you look at a cap on insulin costs, you look at what's been pouring into our cities, the funds that have been pouring into our cities, infrastructure dollars, the list goes on. You all know what's happened with this administration, and we've got to continue to remind people how it's made a difference in their everyday lives.
Mayor, getting young people to show up is going to be part of the challenge here. I think the vast majority of young people in this country reject Donald Trump and his view of America and what it means in their lives. But getting them to show up, if you were the Biden campaign, what is the one issue that you think they could use to really motivate young people to realize the stakes in this election are so high they have to turn out and vote for Joe Biden?
Look, during elections, and you know this, it's always hard to talk to young people. It's very difficult to break through. They often don't pay attention until the last minute, and even if you get them early, sometimes they dip out on you and they come back in. What we did in Georgia when Senator Warnock was elected, we took it directly to the young people. Talking about student debt loan forgiveness is a huge issue with young people in Georgia. Also talking about the opportunities that are now before them that they didn't have under the previous administration. This is an inclusive administration that sees all of us. And for as frustrating as I've been with the discourse that's been happening regarding whether or not the president should move forward, I love that as a party we can have those conversations. You weren't included. You can't be included in those conversations in the Republican Party without being banished. And so I think as we remind young people that as they want their voices to be heard, we need a president who listens to them. And Joe Biden has shown that repeatedly.
All right. Senior advisor to the Biden-Harris campaign, Keisha Lance Bottoms. We really appreciate your coming on. Thank you.
Go Falcons.
Very much.
Go
All right,
Falcons.
take care. But we begin this hour with the investigation into the assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump. Questions are mounting about the role of the U.S. Secret Service and how it let a gunman get within striking distance of the former president and the Republican presidential nominee. NBC News correspondent Stephanie Gosk has the latest.
In the weeks leading up to Donald Trump's rally in Pennsylvania, we're now learning there was already increased security around the former president after U.S. officials obtained intelligence that there may be an Iranian plot to assassinate him. The National Security Council emphasizing there's no connection between the alleged Iranian threat and Saturday's shooting by gunman Thomas Crooks.
He's on the roof! He's not! We have people that should not be here. Right on the roof!
From the Republican convention, Eric Trump vented his frustration over the security operation at his father's rally.
There was some breakdown, and they better get to the bottom of it.
According to multiple officials who have spoken with NBC News, there were warnings about Crooks before he opened fire. Butler Township manager Tom Knights says one of his police officers locked eyes with the gunman on the rooftop.
He was able to pull his head up over the roof. He did, in fact, see an individual on the roof with a weapon.
Knight says that officer was responding to a report of a suspicious person and that other police officers helped boost him up to take a look.
And what did the shooter do?
Turned towards him, had the barrel of his weapon pointed at the officer.
And at that point, the officer's hanging on to the side of the roof?
Yes.
Unable to pull a gun out?
Unable to
defend himself? Unable to reach his radio?
Any of that, yeah. Strictly defensive movement for him to lower his head, duck.
Knight says Butler Township Police Department was not the local agency responsible for securing the rooftop. The Secret Service says the building was outside their security perimeter and was primarily the responsibility of local law enforcement. Secret Service Director Kimberly Cheadle telling ABC News the agency decided to secure the building from the inside for safety concerns because of its sloped roof at its highest point.
NBC's Stephanie Gosk with that report, and we just learned the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General says it has opened up an investigation into the Secret Service's handling of security during former President Donald Trump's Saturday rally. Joining us now with new reporting on this is national investigative reporter at The Washington Post, Carol Leonnig.
Carol, thank you so much for being with us. You know, we've talked about some Secret Service problems in the past.
She's written a book on it.
You've obviously written a book about the Secret Service. I'd love for you to help provide context to exactly what happened on Saturday. First of all, the clear shot to the President of the United States, former President of the United States, possible future of the United States. Again, for people looking at the overhead shot, it's dumbfounding. And I will say, let me show you this video from the Wall Street Journal put up on their Instagram. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10.
Okay, take it down now.
9 seconds. So 9 seconds, 10 seconds, they leave the president open for a second, third, fourth shooter. They have no idea. Somebody said, they said shooters down. Well, the assumption always is that there may be more than one. And totally. I'm just surprised. We've heard the story about Dick Cheney being lifted up out of the White House and shoved downstairs. We've heard the story about George W. Bush yelling about getting back to Washington, the Secret Service saying, "It ain't your plane, it's our plane. We'll tell you when you can go back." There are a lot of Republicans, independents, and Democrats wondering, why didn't they do what Secret Service people always do? Put the protectee's head down, cover him up, and shove him into a car.
Well, Joe and Mika, you both zeroed in on the two most important things, but let's put them in order. The first one is that building and that line of sight. For more than 50 years, the Secret Service agents who plan the advance for any public event lose sleep for days before that event, thinking about where can there be a spot on high ground where somebody could get a clear shot at the president or whomever I'm protecting as the Secret Service. And that may be, in this case, the former president, Donald Trump. That's what they think about. And I was interviewing a SWAT team commander yesterday who was not directly involved in this event, but has been involved in other Pennsylvania events in that region. And he said, ma'am, 140 yards from the stage, your grandmother could shoot Donald Trump from there. It's just sort of stunning that nobody was on the roof, and that the director of the Secret Service is saying nobody was on the roof and posted around it because it was sloped and therefore more dangerous. I don't know if that's right or wrong, that it's too dangerous to do that. I'm not an agent, but I've heard from about 24 agents in the wake of this who said that's preposterous. We should have locked down this building one way or another, and it's not the locals' responsibility to make the plan for how to secure it. The second thing is, you mentioned Donald Trump fist bumping. That's another thing agents, current and former, are pretty upset about. Upset because there could be another guy on the horizon after the counter sniper, amazingly, with one shot, takes out Matthew Crooks as soon as his weapon is raised. It's amazing that that guy is basically neutralized almost instantly, not fast enough, but almost instantly upon being determined to be a threat. But there could have been another person. But in Donald Trump's security bubble, you can hear him on the video saying that he wants to get his shoes. You know, he's like saying, wait a minute, let me get my shoes, let me do this. Those agents are putting their biceps and their shoulders in front of his face trying to cover him, but they're also deferring to him. And that is so different, Joe, than what you described about that moment with Dick Cheney, right? That his agent lifted him by the belt loop and said, we're gone, sir. Sorry, no more time to talk.
So, Carol, I'm reading your new piece titled Police Snipers Were Inside the Building as Trump Rally Shooter Fired from the Roof. And you get at something really important, as you've established now that local police were in charge of that building. A lot of people second-guessing that, as you say, as well. But that they actually noticed a man, I'm just reading from your piece now, local police spotted a man acting furtively from inside that building. He was walking back and forth around the building with some gear, and they radioed a Secret Service command post to alert them, the official said. So at that point, he's still outside. The police see him. Presumably, it took him some time to get up onto the roof with that gear. How do you explain the lapse between the time when local police, according to your reporting, did spot this guy and the time the shooting took place?
So there are a couple of things there which are really important to notice, Willie, which are, one, remember the Secret Service makes the plan. And we have heard a lot of different reports, some of which we're trying to sort of nail down right now. But one of the things that I heard last night from people who were on the ground was that the individual local police officers stationed inside that building, by the way, they were counter snipers. They complained, look, we're counter snipers and we're not a lot of use if we're not on high ground looking over the whole place. It's hard to be a counter sniper inside a building. But they were stationed there, and there was a concern that they couldn't essentially leave their post. Hence their communication. We have a suspicious guy, just want you to know. I have confirmed that the Secret Service command post was listening to radio frequency about local police engaging with a suspicious individual who turned out to be Crooks. And the counter sniper, whose name we're not sharing at this moment, the counter sniper who actually had Crooks in his sights during this moment was trying to assess, is he a threat? Does he have a gun? With the slope of the roof off in the distance, the sniper was still trying to discern, is this just a person? Is this an HVAC repairman? You know, what is going on? Trying to figure out, is this person an actual threat to the stage and to the former president? And when the gun was lifted and shot, that's when the counter sniper took him out. But the radio frequency at the time for the command post was alerting the counter sniper teams to this suspicious activity at the AGR building. Again, that very obvious risk, 140 yards from Donald Trump's stage.
Well, and Carol, let's just make a bad situation even worse for the Secret Service. They knew, we found out yesterday, they were made aware of an Iranian plot to assassinate Donald Trump. So they were on notice that other than, you know, domestic threats, that you had the Iranian government planning to assassinate Donald Trump. And even with that knowledge, their performance on Saturday just all the more shocking.
You know, I would like to say you're absolutely right about how shocking it is, but I you know, I know enough agents and I know enough about the Secret Service to know they work their tails off. They try their absolute hardest. One thing that I'm looking at and examining is the advanced security plan potentially having some major vulnerabilities and flaws, mostly involving this outside building that wasn't very outside, wasn't very far away. Remember, my grandma could have killed Trump from there. But these guys and women work like crazy during a campaign season. Are they getting the support and the resources they need? You know, I was told that the counter sniper units are down below 20 individuals right now because of attrition and retirement. I was told the counter-assault teams, remember there were only 2 Secret Service counter-assault agents. Those are the black tactical gear guys who jumped up on the stage heavily armed to cover Trump so that the detail could whisk him away. Only 2 of them there. I'm told the counter-assault team is down below 35. That means there's only really 3, maybe full counter-assault teams in the Secret Service right now, if these sources are right. And I emphasize if these sources are right. And that means the service is once again stretched too thin, which is exactly the finding of both a House Oversight Committee run by Elijah Cummings and Jason Chaffetz in 2015, and the findings of a blue ribbon panel appointed by President Obama, that the agency just was operating on duct tape and staples, especially during a campaign season, that running from pillar to post is what these guys and women are trying to do, and they just don't have enough backing to get this job done. There's one other element, which is they really relied heavily on local police here for some of their tactical purposes. And those officers who were counter snipers from the local area inside that AGR building, how useful is it for them to be inside the building? They're in there because the Secret Service instructed them to be there. They wanted to rely, it seems to me, on their own team. But if you don't have enough teams, that's a worry.
National investigative reporter at the Washington Post, Carol Leonnig, thank you very much. We appreciate your reporting and analysis this morning.
NYPD is on heightened alert this week after the assassination attempt on former President Donald Trump. While police stress there are no specific threats to the city, a new memo reminding officers to stay vigilant amid fears of political violence. NYPD brass has met with Secret Service stationed at Trump Tower, where an increased number of officers are protecting the former president's New York City residence. And joining us now, NYPD's Chief of Patrol, John Schell, and Deputy Commissioner of Public Information at the NYPD, Tariq Shepard. Gentlemen, good morning. It's good to have you with us. So, Chief Schell, I said in the lead up there that there were no specific threats that you all are aware of. But when you see something like that take place on Saturday in Pennsylvania, an attempt on the life of one of the most prominent New Yorkers, what does that tell you? How does that change your thinking here in the city?
Right. So this city, everything that happens worldwide, nationwide, always ends up coming back to New York City one way, shape, or form. And when this happened Saturday, I could tell you immediately our leadership team was on the phone. I was on the beach. We're calling our police commissioner, everyone involved, to see what can we do right now to move quickly. So Trump Towers, Trump properties, how can we be precautionary just to put up that footprint that we're going to keep some areas safe in the city? And we did that immediately. And again, precautionary, no threats, but that's what we have to do. We don't have a choice in the matter.
Deputy Commissioner Shepard, we've heard from the FBI for years now that the threats that they think about a lot more than they used to are these domestic threats. They worry about political violence. How much has that matrix changed for you all in the last few years? Obviously, you're still thinking about ISIS and extremism from outside the country, but how much more do you think about domestic terrorism?
Yeah, well, domestic extremism, domestic terrorism, something that we talk about all of the time. We work a lot with our partners, our intelligence division. They're always on top of this. And, you know, the bottom line is that you can have plans. There will always be vulnerabilities. And we just got to continue to make sure that our officers stay vigilant and remind them of these type of things can actually happen. And so, you know, one of the things we're looking at is how do we continue to improve technology to help us keep, you know, the city safe, these kind of events safe, political visits, dignitary visits. How do we incorporate technology into that? How do we use our drones more effectively? So we're always looking for cutting edge technology keep all these events and people safe in New York City.
Chief Shell, threat level, measuring the threat level. It's a daily incidents report, I would imagine. What's the threat level today compared to like 4 or 5 months ago?
Well, in a city of 8.5 million people, think about it, we're always at some sort of threat level. And we're always prepared to move. We have to. So we're always at a heightened alert, even though there's no specific threat to the city. We're always at a heightened alert because we are New York City. And we always have to be in tune with our Intel Bureau, federal partners. Every minute of the day, something can happen. And again, we have to move quickly. Just like going back to Saturday, we have to move quickly to put up a posture, a footprint of keeping the city safe and vulnerable targets. In this case, Trump properties, if you will, Trump towers. So it's every day.
Can I ask you guys, I know you don't have any inside information, it's not your jurisdiction, but when you saw what happened on Saturday in Pennsylvania, what were the initial questions that popped to both of your minds when you saw the layout, you saw sort of that overhead view of how close that barn was to the stage and all of that? What did you think right away?
Well, I think we had the same questions that everybody else had. We just have to wait for the after action. After all these incidents, they have what they call a hot wash, and they'll go through everything, who was supposed to be where. But you got to remember, this is a multi-agency operation, and we don't know enough right now to make a determination of what went wrong. We'll get all that, and we'll incorporate it into our plan in New York City. One of the things I know is that we work very well with the Secret Service. Great partner, very competent people there. Pennsylvania State Police, same thing. So we'll just wait to see what comes out and see how we can make New York City better. But I do want to say that counter sniper should be man of the year. So calm under pressure, ice water running through his veins, and he stopped a lot more people from being hurt out there. So kudos to the Secret Service counter sniper, because that took a lot of courage and a lot of just cool under pressure to do.
Yeah, it was. And Chief Shell, what did you think when you first saw this?
Well, again, we'll wait for the after action plan to come out before we critique our brothers and sisters down there. But from a civilian point of view, we have the questions are: who had the rooftop? Was there air support? How are the communications? You're hearing different reports about different things, 86 seconds, 26 minutes, 30 minutes. We have to get the facts for make an assessment. But to bring it back to New York City, when a former president was in the Bronx, in the middle of a park, we had numerous interactions with the Secret Service. We have a great relationship, like Tariq said, and going over what's the plan, what's the line of sight. There was a building by the pond. Who's covering that? We know how we did it here with them. We did it well. How it worked in Pennsylvania, I guess that remains to be seen. And then if something did happen wrong, what was wrong, how do we fix it? Thank God the former president didn't get seriously hurt and just become better. No plan is flawless, I'll tell you that.
We'll be swimming in the Summer Games, chasing Olympic history. Katie Ledecky, just 3 medals away from becoming the most decorated American female athlete in Olympic history. Ledecky, who won her first Olympic gold medal in 2012 in London at just 15 years old, now can add the title of New York Times best-selling author to her list of accomplishments. Her new memoir, Just Add Water, My Swimming Life. That is the book, and the 7-time Olympic gold medalist joins us now. Katie, it is so great to see you. I was thinking about that first gold medal. I was there in Paris in 2012, in London in 2012. You were 15 years old, thinking about the world suddenly knowing your name, everybody having these incredible expectations for your career, and you having somehow lived up to all of that. When you think back to those first games and winning that first gold, what do you think of that 15-year-old girl?
Well, it feels like yesterday to me in many ways, and I wrote about it in my book, some of the memories that I have from that race, flipping at the 600 mark, knowing that I only had 200 meters left to win Olympic gold and get my hand to the wall first. So that was a very memorable start to my international career, and I'm really happy that 12 years later I'm still competing at this level and getting to represent Team USA at the highest stage.
And yet now here you are moving over to Paris 12 years later. This is your 4th Olympic Games. How are you feeling now as sort of the veteran of the American Olympic swimming team and the competition you'll be facing this time around in Paris?
I'm feeling good. We've had a great couple of weeks of training camp together as a team, the swimming team. We're in Croatia right now and headed to Paris in a few days. So we're gearing up, and I'm happy to help some of the younger swimmers, the rookies on the team, get get a feel for what the Olympics is like, give a little bit of advice. But they seem really confident and they seem really ready. And to just be on this team is so hard just to make it through the Olympic trials. So they're well prepared, and I'm excited to see what we can do as a team.
Katie, of course, good luck. We'll all be rooting for you. But as you detail in your book, I mean, swimming is so hard. It's often very solitary. It is physically and mentally demanding. And yet, this is 12 odd years just of Olympic competition. Obviously, you swam long before that. How do you keep yourself so motivated to keep doing this?
Well, my answer to that question is the book. I detail what I love about the sport and really all the people in my life that have contributed to my life in the sport and my life out of the sport. Really just that balance that I've been able to have in my life that has allowed me to continue to compete at this level and enjoy the grind, enjoy the training every day. I have the best teammates, the best coaches, best family. That's my mom, Mary Jen, who swam growing up, and she was the one that got me into the pool along with my brother Michael. He was the one I followed into the pool and onto the team, and they've been part of my journey ever since day one.
So, Katie, in the book, you explain the mental edge that you have as a distance swimmer, and you write in part this: it comes down to how you're made. I've known I had an engine since I swam my first mile when I was probably 11. I remember swimming that distance for the first time and walking away from it like that wasn't so bad. Mentally, I've learned that I'm wired as an aerobic swimmer. I embrace routine. I lean into the regularity. The endless laps become a kind of meditation. It's a bit like walking through those spiraling Zen gardens, a way to calm the noise of the world and let the consistency and predictability of swimming back and forth wash over you. I don't have as many fast twitches as the sprinters, and I don't have the technique to be a 50-meter freestyler, but psychologically, I'm built to endure. I love that. And I love how you look at your work as sort of a mindfulness routine instead of work. I'm curious, is that also where you get your confidence? And what about days, if you have any, when you're not feeling that confident? How do you cope with that?
Yeah, it really is something that I see as something that's taught me so much. The sport has taught me so much about determination, resilience, how to get that confidence. And really for me, I get that confidence from my training, from pushing myself every day, from having my teammates and coaches push me. And really just that drive comes from within. And really I'm proud that I've never hit the snooze button once in my life.
Wow.
My mom has made some good snacks before morning practice that got me out of bed. But I always loved those car rides to the pool with my family and my parents. They were our chauffeurs growing up to and from the pool every day, and I owe a lot to them and, again, all the people around me.
It truly does take a whole family. And let me say, you truly are built differently. If you've never hit the snooze button, Katie, extraordinary.
I know.
I want to ask you, one of the things people love about you is your humility. So this might be a hard question for you to answer, but we watch you swim and we watch how much you win by. And we go, now she's doing that against the other greatest swimmers on the face of the earth. There's no one better that you could be competing against. So to what do you attribute that? Why are you heads and shoulders above the rest of the world? Is it a physical thing? Is it a mental thing? What is it as you think about it?
I think it's a combination of a lot of factors. I think, first off, there is a lot of great competition out there. I'm going to be facing some really tough competitors these next few weeks. So I'm excited for that. But really, I think the goal setting that I've been able to do my entire swimming career has allowed me to break these records and continue at this level. And I kind of had a knack for goal setting from the start. I would call my goal times want times, and I would write them down, even for my 8 and under races when I was first starting to swim. So I've continued to do that, continued to set bigger and bigger goals for myself, and that's what motivates me. That's what keeps me going to the pool every day and just continuing to believe that I can achieve these goals that I set my mind to.
It is so much fun for the rest of us to watch. The new book is titled Just Add Water, My Swimming Life. It's on sale now. New York Times best-selling author, yes, and 7-time Olympic gold medalist who has never hit the snooze button, Katie Ledecky. Katie, good luck in Paris. We'll see you over there.
Thank you. Go USA.
Go USA. The opening ceremony for the Paris Olympic Games is next Friday, July 26. Coverage begins at 7:30 p.m. Eastern on NBC and streaming on Peacock.
Hey there, MSNBC fans. I'm Luke Russert, and be sure to join me, Rachel Maddow, Jen Psaki, Lawrence O'Donnell, Steve Kornacki, Joy Reid, and many more September 7th in Brooklyn. MSNBC Live Democracy 2024. Click on the link for ticket information. We will see you there.